Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, coming to you from the Aquarius Home Services studio at Split Rocks. Nice of them to build us a studio here, Anthony.
It was nice.
How have you been?
I've been good.
It looks like you got your hair cut today?
No, I got it cut in Boston.
Oh, nice. How was that?
I felt like a hippie early in the trip. And so I found a barber in Boston that was open on a Monday. Went in there. I had 2 off days in Boston.
Yeah.
It's a long trip. It felt like we've been gone for a month. And it's interesting because you get in such a routine during the hockey season where it's like off day, game day, off day, game day. And anytime you're on a trip where you have 2 off days in a city, it feels like it adds a week to the trip. Because the first day you're wandering around the city and like, I don't really have anything to do. I don't have any prep to do for the next game. I can do that tomorrow. And Boston's a great city to have an extra day. It was disappointing we didn't get an off night in Montreal to have a full dinner. We did stay after the game, but did not get a chance to have dinner there. But a trip with Lou Nanny, and I had dinner with he and his family. I have no idea what day. The day before the Boston game, which was fun down in the North End. Had a great dinner down on the waterfront the night before. It was a great trip.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Vinny didn't get to play against the Wild on Tuesday night. I'm sure Louis was excited about that.
Disappointed for sure, and it was interesting because we were having his parents were there, Tino and Michelle, because Vinny's birthday is I think maybe yesterday or today, one of the days, and so they were going to go out anyway. And he played 8 games in a row, and then all of a sudden he gets scratched 2 times in a row, and. The NHL's a business. Nobody's just, hey, let's feel good story. Lou's here, his parents are here. Let's let the kid play. I mean, that isn't the way it works. But that was just to the way they're talking at dinner, and they are all living and dying. This guy coming off the injured list, that means somebody's got to go to the minors. Even if it's a paper move, that's me because I don't need waivers. And there are a lot of glorious stories about life in the NHL, but being the guy that's on the bubble every single day of your career isn't one of them. And it's every day in the NHL is a great day, but it really is something when you watch guys like that and just how down they are, knowing here my parents are here, my grandpa's here, and I'm out.
Perfect segue to the Minnesota Wild because Travis Dermott's probably feeling that right now. His walking papers were signed the second that Tim Stützle's face was driven into the ice by Ryan Hartman because Ryan is on the 23-man roster right now. They just picked up, coincidentally, his best friend, Vinny
Hinostroza.
Yeah, Hinostroza. Sorry, I'm like choking here. Hinostroza. Got to grab some waters at some point. Hinostroza off waivers today. I chatted with him. He's
50% off a Giggly.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. So he's super excited to get here, but he's the extra forward. Lauko was placed on IR today. But at some point, if the Wild have another injury at forward, I mean, they're not going to carry 8D, especially with one of their forwards being suspended for the next 10 games or 9 in the next 10. And so Travis is just sort of biding his time now. And, at some point, probably sooner than later, he's going to be put on waivers and sent down to Iowa if nobody claims him. Maybe Edmonton takes him back, and then they can assign him right to the minors. That would be permissible for them since the Wild grabbed him from Edmonton. But let's first start about talking about the Ryan Hartman incident. I mean, that was an interesting. The whole game he was running hot. It was clearly by watching it. The other thing that happened that period is that he was in it felt like prolonged battle with referee Garrett Rank. And I think that Rank's eyes were constantly on him.
Yeah.
It started in the corner when he had a stick knocked out of his hand. And then talking to Louis Nanny during one of the off days, Louis said that the entire TV timeout they were fighting.
They were, although most of it was Hartman yelling at Hamonic, and Rank just got in the middle of it and said, hey, wait and do your talking on the ice. That led to Hartman and Rank having a little exchange. Most of the argument, while Rank was standing there, it was actually with Hamonic, who had thrown a hip into Hartman at the blue line earlier in the game. Hartman thought it should have been an interference call. And look, his wires were crossed. There's no question about it. And when Stützle accused him of diving after Stützle two-handed him coming out of the corner, and Hartman did get an embellishment penalty on it.
Did you think it was an embellishment? Because I did not.
I did not, but
But I guess that was my point of the fighting
Yeah.
with Rank, is I think Rank just decided to give it to him.
I think there's probably some of that. And I mean, he did sell it, but he did get two-handed across the shins. So it's hard to say you're embellishing anything. I just think it was at that point, the frustration level with the team was high. We've seen this happen to Hartman before, where something happens, and it was one of those nights for him for sure. And it was a mistake. The play with Stützle on the faceoff circle just cannot happen. It's unacceptable. The suspension was warranted. I thought originally my guess was it was going to be 8 games, ended up 10, which, to say that's really, it's close. It is close, but it's also not close. I mean, that's a ton of money that you're talking about. Every game is 12% of a guy's salary. I mean, that's a big deal to be 10 instead of 8. So I know John Hines said publicly he thought it was a little high. I just think it was a mistake you can't make. It's crucial for this team right now with Kaprizov out of the lineup. They can't afford to have a potential scoring type guy out of the lineup.
No, just not a good play. And I know that during hockey games you're not thinking about the bigger picture here and all that, but it does have, when you look at it, it comes across as selfish because the team's already without Kaprizov. They're banged up. They're now fighting for their playoff lives. I mean, I don't think they're going to fall out, but they are now up against it. And then you take in which again, Ryan's not thinking this on the ice, but when you're suspended, you are part of the 23-man roster. Your cap counts. This is all stuff. Now this takes him past the trade deadline. It makes Bill Guerin's life even more difficult at the trade deadline. And again, it's going to cost somebody their job on the roster because now they have a wasted roster spot on a team that absolutely couldn't afford it.
Well, now it seems inappropriate to even share, but before the trip started, well, after the Chicago game, but when we were in Toronto, and it was during the morning skate, and we were just chatting about the Wild lineup and how we thought Brodin and Johansson might join them at some point on the trip. But we were talking about who has to step up, and that was going to be one of the topics we were going to discuss in the pregame show with Louis. And Louis had made the comment, like, I wish I could be the guy and pull Hartman aside and say, just play free. Don't worry about penalties. Don't worry about anything. Just go play. Play free. And he said, that's when he's at his best. And I kind of looked at him. I said, Louis, I couldn't disagree more. They've been trying to rein this guy in for a year, and he hasn't had the greatest offensive year, and that's, I'm sure, why Louis was making the comment he was. But I said, this is not the guy you just say, take the reins off and go let her rip, because who knows what might happen. And sure enough, 2 nights later, that is what happened.
Yeah,
so,
and obviously all eyes are on him, and the referee's eyes are on him. And again, the reason why it wasn't bright on Ryan's part is regardless of whether you're fighting with Garrett at rank or not, Garrett's a veteran referee at this point, and he is well aware that they just had this run-in, the shift before, the embellishment call, the two-handed slash. Now, Garrett Rank is looking last play of the second period. It's Hartman versus Stützle on a faceoff. Obviously, an astute referee, and we talk all the time about how it bothers us that referees don't have a feel for the game and don't understand what's going on. Garrett Rank is absolutely focused in to make sure Ryan doesn't do something stupid, and he did something stupid. And it's that simple. And, when Ryan, and again, I like Ryan as a player, but when Ryan goes and tells the Department of Player Safety that this was an accident, well, remember the Department of Player Safety last year on December 31st gave Ryan the benefit of the doubt on a quote-unquote accident when he cross-checked Cole Perfetti in the teeth. And off a face-off, very similar sneaky play. They gave him a fine rather than a suspension. And that context is in their head when they're making this determination.
Well, especially when that one, then after the fact, guys came out publicly to make, I know they technically don't use that, but it's in the back of your mind.
Absolutely.
When the guys came out and Hartman even said that he did it on purpose. So as payback, it is unfortunate. And I don't doubt for a minute that the embellishment call on the slash by Stützle was because it was Ryan Hartman, but he's earned that reputation, and unfortunately now he's going to have to live with it.
Now 10 games definitely seems excessive. I agree with you. I thought it would be maybe 6 or 7. From really diving into some of the long suspensions, the one comparable I think that they really used in this situation was Alex Burrows against Taylor Hall a couple years ago. More than a couple years ago, but the old quote, not a hockey play, sort of a similar, Alex was a knee to the head, so similar to the head. And then the other thing is clearly a league saying to Alex Burrows, we are tired of dealing with you and we're going to send you a message. And that was the similarity here. So we'll see what happens. Ryan, on the NHLPA is the one that has to do it on Ryan's behalf today, filed an appeal. That goes first to Gary Bettman. Bettman will then make his decision. He could lower it. But if it's still 6 or more games, then it will go to an independent arbitrator. And usually when it goes to an independent arbitrator, generally what happens is by then we except for Tom Wilson, because it was such a long suspension, and coincidentally the arbitrator reduced it to 14 games, and he actually returned against the Wild, and in that game hurt Devin Dubnyk by crashing in the net and concussing him, but whatever, I digress. But in the one thing here is because of the Four Nations and the long break, theoretically, this arbitrator could wind up hearing the case really early in the process, which is why I'm sure it makes a lot of sense for Ryan to appeal here. Maybe he gets some games back and certainly some money back. So we will see. I always find it interesting.
Worth a shot. I mean, you have nothing to lose.
Absolutely.
You're on the shelf doing nothing anyway for 10 games. If you can get it reduced down to 8.
And he really genuinely has nothing to lose, because his reputation is at an all-time low, not just league-wide, but I am shocked. Wild fans are tired of it. And what Ryan now needs to worry about is the Wild tired of it? Is Bill Guerin and John Hines and everybody inside the organization saying, enough is enough, we are going to cut ties with him this offseason? I really genuinely think that is probably what's going to happen. I think that they are going to work hard to try to trade him. And if they don't trade him, I think they will genuinely consider a buyout, because I just don't think that this can continue to happen. It's 4 times now since 2023. I wanted to ask you this. I always find it interesting when a union files a grievance like this, an appeal, what Tim Stützle's thinking.
Right. It's one player that attacked another.
Yeah. And Tim Stützle, I'm sure, is just looking at him like, I'm glad I give 1.8% of my salary or whatever it is to freaking the NHLPA to file a grievance on behalf of the other guy. That happened to me once at a certain newspaper, too. We had layoffs, and you're supposed to, it was not layoffs. It was buyouts. And the way that buyouts worked is that it was offered to you based on seniority. Well, I was low man on the totem pole, and I got essentially skipped over, and somebody else got a buyout. And then the union essentially filed a grievance against the newspaper I was working for at the time, basically saying, not against me, but basically saying like, wait a minute, somebody else was below on the seniority. And I remember thinking that exactly. I'm like, I'm paying you guys to protect me too here. But anyway, there we go. So Ryan's going to sit, as far as we know, up until March 9th, when the Pittsburgh Penguins come to town. Now, Vinny Hinostroza comes here, veteran of 387 games. He's been on 6 teams before. The one thing about Vinny, and I've watched him obviously a long time just being in the league, is that he's got a lot of speed. He certainly has more skill than what we've seen on the fourth line from some of their guys. And I think that's what they're banking on here, is it's worth a shot, right shot. And maybe he can at least, help defensively. I assume play PK. We'll see. But definitely maybe chip in the odd goal, something that we haven't been seeing other than this road trip from the fourth line most of the year.
Yeah. And coincidentally, we talked to Andrew Burnett about him when we were in Nashville. He had some big numbers in the American League this year. I think he had 33 points there, if I remember right. And he said he's got speed. We're kind of intrigued by him. He just didn't do anything when he was with. I think he had 1 point in 13 games with Nashville, if I remember right. This
2
year.
assists.
And he had 1 year, and I remember seeing him in Arizona the 1 year where he was playing in a relatively significant role for them. It was approached 40 points 1 year in 74 games or something. He has a little skill. I don't know. To me, you might as well take a shot. Why not? And at this point, especially if Lauko's banged up again, the fourth line I thought was good on the trip. Husnudinov looked like a different player after he scored his goal early. Started to skate, started to make plays. But the reality is, those guys, if you're counting on those guys to score on a regular basis, you're probably in a tough spot.
Right. And the coincidence is that Hinostroza and Hartman are best friends, grew up together in Illinois. Actually, Sorensen, the Chicago Blackhawks coached both of them for 2 years in Bantams. They played against each other in the Mite State Championship. And then they were together for 4 years on the Chicago Mission. They were in the Bloomingdale Bears football team. They were teammates for a year, played U.S. World Juniors, Rockford Ice Hogs, and then obviously as rookies with the Chicago Blackhawks, they were actually roommates. So what are the chances? I mean, it's amazing sometimes the way life works. Ryan Hartman's suspension gets Vinny Hinostroza a new job with the Minnesota Wild when they were trying to send him back to Milwaukee. So pretty crazy. It's nuts. Let's talk about the last two games. Shutouts. I think the Ottawa game, I think we all know what happened. I mean, it was obviously not good. It was one of their worst. They've in a season full of, really oddly, 4, 5, 6 goal losses way too many times. That was by far their worst game, I thought, of the season, and specifically on the road. But now they can't score. And the top line this entire road trip just didn't produce at all. The one thing I'll say is, and I don't know if you're going to agree with me or not, but when this team was winning, for the most part, Marco Rossi was centering that top line. Eriksson Ek just has not been himself all year, at least offensively. And you do wonder if now that they're at home, if they make at least that move and put Rossi back between Boldy and Zuccarello.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, when they were at their best was when Rossi was with Kaprizov and Zuccarello, and then Boldy was with Eriksson Ek, and they just haven't. I think they were hoping Boldy and Ek together would recreate some magic. But I think maybe you try to split those guys up right now and play Rossi with Zuccarello. Johansson's been good with those guys. He actually was good with Boldy and Eriksson Ek too. So, maybe you try to do something where you balance out those lines a little bit, because I didn't think Marco was great on this trip. I thought he struggled. Eriksson Ek just hasn't. He's been snake bitten most of the year. And yeah, the Ottawa game was almost like a team due for a letdown. They had the grinded out win in Toronto, then the emotional night in Montreal,
3-4.
And I remember, in fact, we did the podcast that morning, and when you asked me about it, I said I thought going into the trip this was going to be the toughest game of the trip, was the Ottawa game, and it was. Now, I didn't think they were going to get beat 6-0, but in the game, when Hartman took that major to start the third period, short for 5 minutes, down by 3, you knew that it was trouble. And even if they only get one and make it 4-0, it was going to be game over. And as soon as they scored the first one in the opening minute and a half of the period, you knew that it was just headed the wrong way. Felt badly for Gus because he actually played pretty well in the game, but gave up 6. And we had a graphic on it that I think we used the graphic in the Boston game. It was the second worst shot differential game they've had in the franchise history.
Yeah.
Got outshot, 52-16, I think, in the game. The Boston game, I actually thought they played pretty well and probably had better chances than the Bruins did over the course of the game, and just couldn't score. Swayman was great that night, and it would have been a game that if it just happened by itself, like let's say that game happens in between Chicago and Toronto, you probably don't think anything of it. But because it followed Ottawa, now you're saying, holy cow, now the team can't score. And it really, to me, the Ottawa game, throw it away. It was a terrible night. The Boston game, they played the way they have to play. They just couldn't score.
Yeah. Obviously, with Kaprizov out, they need their top guys scoring. And as you mentioned, Rossi had I agree with you, a terrible trip. I mean, that game in Ottawa had to be his worst game of his career. I mean, I know he wasn't on the ice for the third goal, but he was on the ice for the third goal because of a perplexing decision. After losing a puck battle in the corner, he takes a really odd line change. First 2 goals, I thought he was largely responsible for. I think Boldy's getting back to being perimeter.
Although I thought he was good in Boston.
Yeah.
I think he had 10 shot attempts and 6 shots on goal. He just missed. He was in position to score. I thought the first couple shifts of the game. Could you imagine, though, how
many goals Boldy would score if he went to the areas that Marco does? I mean, he just relies on one-timers from angles, and it's get to the net, man. And which is how he was playing when he was playing with Eriksson Ek early in the year. I remember Hines talking about
that one of the reasons he thought those guys were good together was because when Boldy played with Eck, he played like Eck.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen that much lately. I think it's a team right now. Find a way to get one out of these two on this homestand and reset coming out of the break. I think right now it's a team that's been pushing pretty hard through a schedule that's been a bit of a grind, through some major injuries where guys have been asked to carry a lot bigger load than what they normally would have. And I think it's just a team right now that they need a break.
Yeah.
Maybe as much as any of the other contenders in the West do.
Yep. Carolina comes to town. One of the Wild's most impressive road wins of the season was against Carolina. Different Carolina team since the last time we saw him. Taylor Hall's on that team. Mikko Rantanen's on that team. So, Mikko will be diving all over the ice and probably goading Jake Middleton into some aggravating penalties. We have a microphone up here, by the way. Anytime anybody that wants to come on up, feel free to ask questions.
Hockey isn't the only thing happening on the ice, and as lakes are freezing over, it's time for ice fishing. OnX Fish offers the most comprehensive fishing tools for increasing your confidence and success on the hard water. Use the Fish app to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potential. OnX Fish also shows you hotspots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
Royal Credit Union is your trusted advisor for all your business banking needs. Whether you're starting or growing a business, Royal offers a full suite of business account and lending solutions to meet the needs of your business now and into the future. Royal has business checking and savings accounts, business certificates and money markets, treasury management services, and business loans. Choose Royal Credit Union as your business's financial partner and get started today at rcu.org/Royal Business. Insured by NCUA. Loans subject to credit approval. Equal credit opportunity.
Hey, have you been dreaming of a lake cabin lifestyle with boating, fishing, and family fun in northern Minnesota? Well, lately I've thought a lot about how cool it would be to have a getaway like so many Minnesotans. And if you're like me, you probably think that owning your own lakeside getaway is beyond your budget. Well, if you think lake cabin real estate prices keep going up, well, think again. This is Russo, and I'm here to tell you there is an affordable way to enjoy a cabin lifestyle and all that goes with it. And yes, I said affordable. I founded a Clamshell Beach Resort, which is located on the Whitefish chain of 14 lakes for you and your family to enjoy. Here's how. Clamshell has lake homes that offer deeded fractional ownership, and the keywords there are deeded and fractional. You own it. Imagine having 5 weeks a year to enjoy Clamshell with its beaches, pool, and lodge that's full of kids' activities. Is golf your game? There's a great golf course right across the road. Like winter sports? Well, you can go ice fishing, cross-country skiing, or snowmobiling right out the door at Clamshell. And there's no maintenance, no grass mowing, no snow removal. It's done all for you. And you can own a share of Clamshell Beach Resort at an affordable price. To learn more about ownership opportunities at Clamshell Beach Resort, go to cottagesonwhitefish.com or contact Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. That's cottagesonwhitefish.com or Pat Egan at 612-220-9819.
Let me throw you. Last week we had a little bit of an abbreviated show, and we didn't get to Vinny's last two thoughts.
Yeah, let's go for it.
He called me today to say that he really wanted to hear your opinion on him. So the first one is, right now, contracts and everything a part of this equation. Would you trade Brock Faber for Connor Bedard?
No. Why?
That was his question.
Okay.
But I think it's an interesting question because of the fact that, you look at Bedard, he's got one more year on his entry-level deal, I believe. Mm-hmm. And then you're probably looking at a guy who's going to probably make 13 or 14 million bucks, right?
Yeah.
Where Faber's on an unbelievably team-friendly deal.
Yeah.
How many general managers do you think would make that trade?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
I think almost all of them would trade Faber for Bedard.
Yeah.
Because they'd look at it and say, we got a chance at a generational type scoring guy.
Right.
I don't like his game.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I mean, I also look at it from a standpoint that those general managers probably don't get to watch
Faber
play and his subtleties the way that we do. You know, I think $8.5 million in a couple of years is going to be a bargain for him.
I think it's going to be one of the best team-friendly contracts. The only reason why I would even think about going the other direction on it is because Faber might be a guy that is – there's more Brock Fabers out there than number one overall pick centerman like Bedard.
And the other thing is that Brock – his defensive game and especially his penalty killing, which is going to have to improve. That's going to have to be his cup of tea. And I think all of us that look at him as an $8.5 million defenseman got to realize that with Boyum here, that he's not going to be a number one power play guy. So a lot of those numbers that he was able to generate from November on last year when he was on the number one power play, it's just probably going to be impossible with how little ice time the number two power play gets in this uniform. So, you know, that would be one thing.
The numbers might not be there, but he could still be just as good a player. And, you know, right now with the top four defensemen back intact, you get a chance to see it, that they are two of the top 8 tandems in terms of goals against per 60 minutes in the NHL. Mm-hmm. He and Middleton are like number 8. Brodin and Spurgeon are number 1. And
let me give you this one, Vinny.
All right.
Vinny's dad. Brock Faber for Macklin Celebrini.
I would do that.
Wouldn't.
I would.
Yeah. There's one that I
would. And I
like Celebrini's game so much better than
I do too.
Bedard.
But I would even consider the Bedard deal only because of the fact that you just don't get number one overall picks very often. And there are some things in Bedard's game, like his release is different. And I personally don't like his game right now, but I think some of that can be coached.
Yeah.
I think he's a lazy defensive player. I've been the guy on top or running the bandwagon for the fact he's minus 60 something. And I'm so tired of the people dismissing it, saying, well, his team's lousy. He's got one other guy on his team who's worse. As a plus minus guy. Not everybody's minus 60. But I just think sometimes when you get that guy that you have to take a shot. I would trade Faber for Celebrini. I mean, it's all hypothetical. Nobody's going to make that offer, but I think Faber is going to end up being one of the guys, like, bang for the buck by the end of his contract is going to be one of the best in the league. I just think you can find guys like that.
I've watched Celebrini a lot here the last month, and I'll probably regret saying this, but that guy's got so much Sidney Crosby in his game. Like, it's not even funny. Like, he is he's just a puck hound, you know? Where he really shocked me was the Wild's first visit there, when he was by far the best player on the ice, scored both their goals.
But remember how many shifts like Bedard doesn't?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, like, I just remember him going into the corners with Marcus Foligno and coming out with it and not being at all intimidated as an 18-year-old that he's going into the corner with Foligno. You know, that type of thing. What's Vinny's other thoughts?
Here's his other question was, top-end forward prospects seem to have to spend time in the American Hockey League because they need power play 1, first line, top 6 reps minutes. Do defensemen need less time in the minors because being a 5th or 6th D in the NHL doesn't change as much as being a number 1 defenseman in the
No,
AHL?
I think it takes longer for a D. I don't think it matters what role you're going to be in the NHL. So, I mean, you don't want a 5th or 6th D just being a sieve out there just because they weren't developed properly in the AHL. So
I agree. And actually, so I talked to Vinny a little bit about it just because he called me to say, hey, are you going to get to my thoughts this week? And I said, you know, part of it is I think that no matter what league you're coming from, you can't simulate the size and the speed combination in the NHL. So guys that go, whether they're coming from college hockey or the American Hockey League, they get away with so much because of the fact that they just don't get victimized when they make a mistake. And now all of a sudden you come up, and if you're a stride late to the front of the net, you can't move those guys. You have to make your puck decisions so much faster, and it's just there's no way to simulate that. I think defensemen almost without exception, defensemen take longer. Brock Faber might be the one guy who's different, whose game seemed better suited for the NHL than it was for college hockey.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember when he was in college and the Wild saying this guy is pro ready. And you know, I don't hear the same stuff about Zev. Like, you know, like I think Boyum, I think when they sign him, they'll obviously put him right in the NHL, but I don't think that necessarily means he's 100% making the team next year, but we'll see right out of camp. But I think that Wild fans also need to temper their expectations and realize that not everybody's Brock Faber, and that if Boyum needs a little time in the minors, so be it. Any questions, come on up to the mic. By the way, I have a beef with Margot. So I
Really?
hear that she's going.
Wow, you're on my side or something?
So
This
I
doesn't even involve me, probably.
yeah, well, just the fact that she went out with many of the ladies from our Europe trips tonight and didn't bring them here. Like, why wouldn't you just bring them split?
Well,
routes?
especially because she just called me as I was walking in. They went to the vineyard in Stillwater, Seven Vines. So she was halfway here.
Yes, I like Seven Vines.
Yeah, you had a great wine recommendation there. One of your all-time best.
Rosé.
Yeah, it tasted like Kool-Aid.
All right. Well, there goes our endorsement from them.
Well, some of their wines are good, just not the one you recommended.
Yeah. It tasted well until you showed up and absolutely
to share the
it.
story. We've been there a couple times, and they actually do have a couple wines that I like, and they have a couple local grapes that are interesting. They have one that's a Marquette grape that's good. But we show up, and Russo's already there, and he's ordered a rosé, and he said, "But this rosé is incredible." So the lady comes to take our order, and I said, "Well, if he says it's that good, we'll just do a bottle instead of a glass. Let's grab a bottle." They come with this bottle, and I took a sip, and I'm telling you, it was Hawaiian Punch. It was the worst, most vile glass of wine I've ever had.
Oh my God!
And
First,
then
Alex, we are 100% having to cut this out. We're gonna get sued by Seven Vines.
And so then Michael takes a sip of his and says, "Oh yeah, I think it's getting worse as it's been sitting on the table."
It was really good. It was good until you came and sewered it and just ruined it in my own head, and then I couldn't get out of it.
Yeah,
but I guess
the ability to think freely.
I guess this was the first wine that didn't get better with age.
Oh, bad. It was bad.
Jeez.
So needless to say, the rest of the bottle got sent back.
You better check with the bosses if this is okay to be on the air, because we're going to find out tomorrow that they're like this close to some big endorsement deal.
Well, I did say I do like that. I honestly do like their wines, and their the setting is
none
really
of this
cool.
None of this is going to help the owner of Seven Vines right now get less angry.
I'm going to steer the people the right way. Do not try the rosé. Have the Marquette instead.
All right.
But the setting is cool. Anyway, but the point of your story is that so you're halfway here. Why didn't you guys just come here?
But by the way, we do appreciate all you people coming out and braving the snow tonight. Because
as opposed to stopping at Seven Vines on the way.
Yeah, because clearly Margot just decided that on a snowy night she's going to go drink a bunch of wine. Question.
My question is about the Wilds development system, and specifically the D-men down in Iowa. If you preface this by saying that Billy's had to go outside the organization to bring in Middleton, Chisholm, Bogosian, Faber, why is it that the handful of guys
Merrill, Kulikov.
Why is it that the handful of guys we've been hearing about for 2 to 3 years in Iowa just haven't had even a sniff of the NHL and the Major League roster? And what does that say about the development that's going on down in Iowa? Specifically the D-men, Pert and Lambos and on and on and on. I mean, there were 5 or 6 names that we kept being told were the next generation of D-men. And the fact that Iowa can't seem to win for the second year in a row. So what is it that is or isn't being done down there?
Yeah, I mean, I can't answer that really totally educatedly, but I don't disagree with you. We were sold to basically, we've been hyping these guys up and they haven't made it. Now, is that how they are down there, or is it also Bill Guerin, in a win now mode, always feeling that he wants NHL defensemen or NHL players on this team? I think that is part of it as well. They were young defensemen, and he wasn't just going to throw them right into the fire when this team's edict is to make the playoffs every year. But you're right. I mean, Ryan O'Rourke was supposed to be a stud. I think he's not going to play in the NHL. Who knows about Parrott yet? Lambeau seems to be close. Why is David Spacek great at every single international tournament, but doesn't seem to be doing that at the pro level? That is something they are going to have to figure out. I think they do have to take Iowa more seriously than they have the last 3 or 4 years. It is, there's just no excuse for them to be as bad as they've been the last 3 years, and they have been bad.
The only thing I'd say is the last 2 years, their roster's been crushed when Minnesota's
Right.
had so many injuries. So that last year, especially when you think about
Yeah.
the guys that were up here,
But
most
none
of the year,
those
but
defensemen that he
none-
was talking
right.
about.
and the defensemen to me are a little bit of a. I think it goes back to the question we just had from Vinny, where I think sometimes those guys, they just take longer, and then they're harder to peg because you'll see a lot more guys miss on defensemen in the draft than high end forwards in the, like, let's say the bottom half of the first round and into the second round. I think it's just harder to translate guys' games. And in this case, it looks like, I agree with you, it looks like O'Rourke was a miss. Lambos, I still think, has a chance to be an NHL player. I think Damon Hunt has a chance to be an NHL player. Maybe not top pair guys, but NHL caliber defensemen.
Interesting
We'll see.
that he hasn't gotten his shot in Columbus. But you are right in the fact that, like, you know, and part of this to me is why it's not a big deal is that, like, they went out, they made an exceptional trade for Jake Middleton, traded nothing for him, literally. Kakinen was you know, not an NHL goaltender. And they get him here, but then they go out and they get William in the draft. They trade Brock Faber, and if David Juracek turns into something, so, like, to me, it really defrays, like, this being a big deal, and because they still have not only a really quality blue line with those top guys, but then you have these 21-year-old guys here, you know, an 18-year-old in Boyum. And then obviously you add Juracek and Faber. So to me, it's not the biggest deal in the world, but your point is fair without a doubt.
So the NFL, they have replay assist, and if at home watching, you can see that the ball clearly hit the ground, they overturn it instantly, and as a fan, you can go, yep, and the game keeps moving on. Mm-hmm. Could you ever see the NHL going towards something like that, where it's a high stick for say, but yet never touched another player embellishes, we can all see as a fan at home that nope, it never touched the other player embellished, flopped on the ice, and we're going to the box for a penalty. Clear and obvious stuff like that. Could you ever see them going to something like that as far as replay assist?
Well, they do it for goals, and they actually had it in place long before the NFL did, where they confirmed every goal in Toronto to say, we're going to confirm whether the puck legally entered the net. Now, whether there was interference or anything else, that was all subject for challenge later. But the first thing they did was, we are going to look at this and make sure the puck legally entered the net. All the other stuff is really tough because a judgment call on whether or not a player embellishes something is, I don't know you can do that with replay. They're trying to get there with pucks over the glass for delay of game, but even that, it's sometimes you just don't have the nature of the game is that the camera angles are different than what the NFL has, and they have a better chance, I think, to see more things. Where we had a play the other night where there was a delay of game call, and we just didn't have an angle that clearly showed that it had been deflected. We thought it had been deflected by the way the players reacted, but we didn't have an angle that showed it. And sometimes it's just the way it is.
Yep. By the way, I mentioned our Europe, how Margot decided not to bring them here when she easily could have. By the way, we are going to Spain this.
Oh yeah, so the guy we have in Boston, I've told you about this guy, right? He's our A2 audio technician guy who's in the booth. But I found out after about 4 years of being up, went to culinary school, and he's a level 4 sommelier.
Wow.
So every time we go there, we talk food and wine. And yesterday I walk in the booth and there's a couple bottles of wine just sitting on the counter. The guy wasn't there last year. We pick up all these guys in whatever town we visit. And I just assumed Louis had brought bottles of wine with him because, I don't know, I had no idea what they were doing. And I walked in, and all of a sudden my Eddie walks in, and he said, yeah, I missed you last year. I said, yeah, I thought you retired or something. No. I brought a couple for you to try. And I heard on your podcast you're going to Spain. So this guy listens to our podcast sometimes. So he said, I brought you one Spanish wine. But then he gave me about a 45-minute dissertation on Spanish wine to give us a little insight before we go. I'm excited for it, and especially after talking to him, because some of the Spanish wines I've had that I've liked, he said, you're going to like this better. this is that, but better. This is that, but better. And so I'm
Nice.
excited about that.
Yep. Still a couple more weeks if you want to sign up, but then we're, I think, closing it up. So go to defineddestinations.com, defineddestinations.com. Question, sir?
Back to Hartman, where does the coaching staff's culpability come in when they could clearly see Hartman getting agitated to sit him and avoid what happened?
I think there's a little bit of that for sure. And I actually thought about it after the fact because of where it was in the period. Now, Ottawa had last change, so I can't remember if it was after an icing or not, but it would have been his choice to put Stützle out there against Hartman, because if I'm Hines and I see Stützle on the ice, I don't want Hartman anywhere near him at that point in the game. But I really think they've talked to Ryan, and it isn't just this staff, it was the previous staff too. They've talked to him so much about, you've got to toe the line. You can't go over this line. That at some point the guy is an NHL player, and he's going to have to figure it out. Now, maybe this will be the one that catches his attention because of the dollars involved.
Yep.
I don't know. But I did think about that after the fact. I was like, boy, what if you just didn't have him on the ice for that face-off? I also think at that point, the frustration level for the team as a whole was at such a high level. That second period had been so lousy. You're down 3-0. They haven't had the puck for about 14 minutes. I think they had an offensive zone face-off and thought, let's put the guys out there that have a chance to make a play.
Yeah. Hey, while this is on my mind, I want to bring to attention a real tough situation that happened with a 17-year-old in Vancouver late last month named Jackson Drum. He broke his C1 and C2 vertebrae during a hockey game in Vancouver. He's still in hospital in Vancouver, has had a trach put in and everything. He's from Alexandria, Minnesota. It's a real tough situation. They're hoping to put him on an air ambulance and get him to a hospital in Atlanta, which is extremely expensive. Don't know if insurance is going to cover it, all that type of stuff. You can go to the website. His grandfather is here tonight, and I was lucky enough to meet him. I've seen him on Twitter for years, so nice to put a face to a Twitter name. And it is givesandgo.com, right? givesandgo.com/pray for Jackson. So you can go to that website and make a donation and read more about him. So thanks for coming, Dave.
A little bit of low-hanging fruit here, but what is the reason for the poor penalty kill? Is it face-offs in the zone? Is it not getting saves in a timely manner? Is it the way they defend them?
Anthony?
All of the above. And did we talk about this on a show recently?
We've talked about it on the last 50 shows. I think. Yeah,
perhaps. Face-offs are certainly a part of it, but it was, where were we on the road when I think it might have been in Chicago. And I was on this trip, and I was texting with John Hines in the morning because I was digging into the numbers of the penalty kill, because the eye test said it had been better for about 2 weeks, where they were contesting zone entries and were early in the year, it felt like they were giving up goals 5 seconds into every power play. Now it felt like they were giving a whole bunch up with 2 seconds left in a power play, where you were about to say, boy, the kill was great, and then the puck's in the net.
How about that? Remember the 5-on-3? It was like in that 2 seconds between the 5-on-3. Where was that? I forget. It was recently, but same exact situation.
Right.
Like they killed the 5-on-3, and then right between the 5-on-3 to the 5-on-4, boom,
they
goal.
scored.
Yeah.
And so I dug a little deeper into the numbers, and we went back, I think, to maybe the start of January. And they were in the top 6 in the league in terms of chances against when shorthanded per 60 or per 2 minutes, whichever way you want to do it, for expected goals against, attempts and shots against. They were in the top third of the league. High danger save percentage, 32nd. And it's been the story all year. They just have not gotten enough saves on the kill. They've certainly had their moments and had their flaws with execution too. But for the season, I believe their high danger save percentage on the kill, this was 3 games ago. Well, it can't have gone up after the Ottawa game when they gave up 3. They were 31st overall in high danger save percentage on the kill. And you have to get saves on the penalty kill. It's that simple. We looked at the top 6 penalty kills or the top 5 penalty kills were all in the top 8 in the league in high danger save percentage on the kill. And, I don't think that's a coincidence. They just haven't gotten enough saves. And it was the case in this one. Ottawa scores 3, and it wasn't all on Gus, but at some point it's okay to make a save on a high danger chance.
We had a bunch of Twitter questions on our last show, but we didn't get to because it was abbreviated. One of the ones that was interesting was about Kirill's injury history and whether it would drive his cap number down at all. Joe Smith talked with Bill Guerin that we know that's not the case. They're not gonna all of a sudden go from, you're a $15 million player on our offer. Now we're going to offer you 12.
It isn't going to drive the Wild's price down, but I think it might increase the odds of him signing.
I agree with you,
because he's not going to be as sure somebody else is going to go 17.5
right
over 7 years to match the total dollar package of what the Wild can give him over 8.
Yeah, I agree. And, but I think that his injuries are a concern right now. I mean, this is 3 years in a row. It's you don't want him to go the way that Gaborik went, where Gaborik just never really reached his full potential here as a star, because he was always dealing with abdominal issues or hip issues or things like that.
Yeah. What's weird is Kirill's are all unrelated.
Yeah.
And it isn't like it's a guy who doesn't train. It isn't like a guy who's out of shape. And it's kind of like when we've talked about the guys like Brodin and Spurgeon. I mean, Brodin blocks a puck with a foot. And that could happen to anybody. Spurgeon gets cheap shotted in the corner. That could happen to anybody. But when it starts happening to the same guys year after year, I don't know. There is something that there's been some like aura over the Wild these last couple of years, because it is unbelievable how many times as soon as one guy comes back, it's like one night and then somebody else is on the injured list. Yeah.
Or everybody's about to come back and then you drive somebody's head into the ice and get a 10-game suspension, and it has the same effect. I don't know. Any more questions? Otherwise we have some more. Some pretty good questions.
Are you warm enough,
Anthony,
by the way, for tonight's show?
Yeah, I am. I'm not used to the cold. I was out of town here the last couple of weeks, actually. Question again.
Next year is a long way off, but if Wallstat continues to struggle in Iowa and Marc-Andre Fleury is absolutely not coming back, and you've led me to believe that you're sure he's calling it quits, then are they still 100% or even 80% sure that it's Gus and Walls next year up here? Or are they going to have to go shopping for a backup?
Well, I think they're definitely going to have to get a really quality number 3 that could play games if things go south. But when you commit $2.2 million on a one-way contract to a goaltender,
he's going to be here.
Yeah, Uncle Craig's not going to want to pay that in Iowa. So
can you imagine if Marc-Andre Fleury with a straight face went back to Montreal for his 3rd final trip to Montreal?
I know. Well, that's when I asked that question. Were you there when I asked Fleury that question in Vegas, and he's like, no chance? I feel like that was just me alone in the corner. But anyway, so I asked him, like, and he that was his joke. He's like, could you imagine? He's like, at some point, I got to stop doing this. Like, it can't be like every time I go back to Pittsburgh, that's again, maybe my last time. So he said no chance. I believe no chance. I think he has definitely. Earlier this year, there were just so many people talking like, maybe, he's playing at such a high level, and you just never knew. But when he says no chance, I tend to believe him. The question is, what does he do after he's done? And I still think that Billy's going to try to make sure he doesn't get too far away.
Some way he'll be involved with the organization, I think.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think there's got to be an NHL veteran goaltender as a part of the plan, even if he's in Iowa to start the season. There's got to be a guy with NHL experience here.
Absolutely.
Aquarius Home Services offers 5-star rated HVAC, water treatment, plumbing, and electrical services throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin. And I'm telling you right now, don't let the cold take over. Keep your home warm and worry-free this winter. And you could do this by saving $98 on repairs for all furnace repairs from a company you trust this winter. And this $98 off deal isn't just for furnace repairs. It's applicable for plumbing and electrical as well. How do you get this? $98 off. Visit AquariusHomeservices.com to get your heat back fast. Go again to AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
We love supporting local businesses. We love working with local businesses. I started buying stuff at Twill in the Edina Galleria a long time ago. When I started this podcast network, I was really hoping I'd be able to work with Scott Dayton, the founder and owner of Twill, and I was lucky enough to be able to do so. Now my closet is pretty much all Twill stuff. I don't get free stuff. I don't get discounts. I don't ask for discounts. I go there and pay full freight because I want to support a local business also because the stuff is awesome. Just bought a fresh batch. I'm about to go on a vacation with my wife. Everything I'm packing is Twill stuff because it wears well. It's comfortable. It doesn't wrinkle on planes. It doesn't wrinkle in suitcases. It comes out looking good. It wears like iron, and I'm never going to have to replace it. It's just so simple. Everything from from casual shoes to dressy shoes to golf stuff to dress stuff to suits. By the way, you get everything tailor fit, which really helps me out. And everything from, gopher stuff to winter stuff to summer stuff. They just have everything. So go to twilmn.com, sign up for email updates. They won't send you anything unless they have a very specific event they want you to know about. They won't spam you. And go in there and say hello. Tell them we sent you. It's just a pleasant group of knowledgeable people. They are experts at what they do. It's the best men's clothing store in Minnesota. Go check out Twill online and in person in the Edina Galleria.
Keep the good times rolling without the regrets. Giggly THC beverages are your go-to for bold flavor and smooth vibes. Zero alcohol and no bad decisions. Just THC-infused cocktails, seltzers, and teas packed with natural ingredients and performance-boosting superfoods like ashwagandha and ginseng. Find Giggly at over 500 locations like Total Wine, MGM, and Cub Foods, or shop online at giggly.com. That's GIGLI.com. Ready to upgrade your drink game? Well, use code GIGGLYNORTH for 50% off your first order. Giggly. Sip smarter, feel better.
With Pietrangelo pulling out of the Four Nations, do you think that has any effect on how the Wild are looking at Brodin, or do you think they have a real faith that he's just going to be a number 7 and is going to be along for the ride?
Yeah, I think that they are not. First of all, you have the USA GM. I don't think it'd be kind of awkward if then you go over to the Swedish defenseman when you're trying to get guys like Quinn Hughes to play her, and you're like, I think you should rest. In a lot of ways, because he hasn't played a lot of games here last month. I mean, it'd probably be a great tune-up for him to get, as long as he doesn't get hurt again. It'd be a great tune-up for him to come back ready to go here when the schedule resumes. So I don't think so. I think that Brodin wants to play in it. I think he was hugely honored to get in there. I think all these guys are. Like Petro obviously is dealing with something, but they're like, it's gonna be interesting what happens with Sidney Crosby, who's the Canada captain. He missed practice today. He's clearly got hurt last night. Quinn Hughes is dealing with something. I keep on hearing that he's gonna have to pull out. Right now they're saying it's too early to say, but if Quinn Hughes is out, I think
surprised that he played the next night.
Yeah.
When we had the show the other night, I had watched their game the night before against Dallas, and he could barely make it to the bench on his last few shifts.
Right. And he's already playing with like a mangled, I don't know if you ever see him take his glove off during these games. His hands are like different colors and stuff. So he's been dealing with an injury.
How many times has Brodin come back from injury and just blown your mind with how he looks like he hasn't lost a step? It was the same on this trip. From the first shift, I was like, well, this guy looks like
in Boston.
Yeah, it looks like he's been playing every night. And he and Spurgeon were great in that game in Boston. They both were about 60% on expected goals when they're on the ice. I mentioned it earlier, they're number 1 in the league in fewest goals against per 60 minutes when they're on the ice together. And they're number 2 in expected goals for. So it's not like they're not creating anything either. I just think with those two guys both back fully healthy, this is a different team. Yeah.
I don't know. I think that a lot of these guys are really excited to play in it. I'm doing this Jack Eichel story, and I talked to him today. And he grew up with Noah Hannafin. They're best buddies. When he got traded to Vegas, he's the real reason why Noah really re-signed for as long as he did there. But like just listening to Jack today, like I'll be honest, like cynically, I'm like, I was thinking to myself, I cannot believe I got to leave Sunday for 13 days to cover this make-believe tournament. And then, but talking to Jack today, I'm like all pumped again. Like, he is so ready to play Canada or play Sweden, play Finland, and try to, win, quote unquote gold for USA and use this as a precursor for the Olympics. I think Jack's going to be their best matchup center. He is such a great defensive two-way center for Vegas. A lot of people, even though I voted him second, a lot of people thought that he could have easily been the Conn Smythe 2 years ago for Vegas when they won the Cup. It's going to be a heck of a tournament, and this Team USA is really, really good.
Yeah, and I agree with you that there isn't the hook of the Olympics to it, and when you only have the four nations in it, it loses a little luster.
Especially when you don't have Russia in it, it loses luster because they are the best players in the league right now. I mean, like in terms of superstars.
They have superstars, but even the Czechs would be fun to watch.
Yeah.
I mean, there's more good hockey teams, and if you had a bigger tournament, if you had 6 or 8, it might have a little more hook. I'm kind of the same way as you, though. Once these guys get on the ice, their competitive juices will make this fun to watch. But there was a lot of chatter about it on this trip with the obvious reasons. We were in Montreal. We were in Boston where the games will be played. We were in Toronto in front of the national Canadian media. So there were a lot more questions about it. I've actually talked to John Hines about it several times with his preparation going in as an assistant coach. That's been interesting. And so there's a lot. When you start to catch that buzz of the people that are involved with it and their excitement level, it does make you excited. But I know you're leaving Sunday for that. I'm leaving Sunday for 10 days in Costa Rica, so it's kind of the same.
What time's your flight?
It's pretty early in the morning. I don't remember.
I might see you at the airport.
Yeah,
a 6 a.m. flight.
It's possible.
Yeah,
I have no idea what time we leave. I just know we leave on Sunday.
There's no way you would know.
We have a game Saturday night. I know that.
So no goals the last 2 games. Your voice is needed some repair, and it's gotten it.
So I don't know did we talk about this last week? Margot, who's, let's say, critical of my play-by-play job usually, she now sends me texts with ratings on the goal calls. Like that one was 4.5 because you were talking out of 10. That was a 7 because you didn't interrupt him soon enough or whatever. So I'm striving for like above average on a nightly basis. I did get an 8.5 on one on this trip. I don't remember what it was. That was my highest rating so far. But her text was a little like I almost thought it came from you disguised as her because, well, at least your voice hasn't squeaked on a goal call in the last 2 games.
You do kind of at times lately sound like you're going through puberty. So
I've had one this whole year. It was last year I had a couple of games like that.
You had one fairly recently where I had one. I've had one this year. Okay. Believe me, that's when the rating system started. Well, which one was that?
I can't remember. I got a 2.5 on that one.
Yeah, I was watching on TV. A mirror broke in my house.
Yeah, it was. I remember it. I don't remember where it was, but I do know. The ratings have not been great this year yet. I got to work on that.
Question from Cal: what does a typical day for the players on a road trip? What's it like? How much sleep? When do they arrive in the city? So this was an interesting trip because it ran the gamut. You had the train, you had flights, you had buses, you had 2 off days between one, back-to-backs. So every day is different for players.
It is, especially when you get 2 days off in a city, because now the whole routine is off. Our routine it's really amazing the efficiency with which the team travels. Sometimes if you just step back and look at what you're doing, you realize it's like we're kind of like the traveling circus. Like they pack everything up and we've on to the next city and put on a show there and then pack it all up again. But if the game's at 7, we are wheels up off the tarmac at 11 o'clock. So, and that's packing everything up they need out of the locker rooms. All their equipment is on a truck that races to the airport before we get there. Our buses pull up. We get up on the plane, and they've got food and everything ready on the plane. And before we leave, the players then not only the appetizer things that we have, they all get fed an entree, and we usually have 3 choices on the plane before we take off. And then those of us back in Pleasantville they come and take our order once we're up in the air. But I mean, then we land and we're to the hotel It's so amazing. They have one bus that takes the equipment guys right to the rink so they can get everything set up so that the next morning when the players come to practice, their equipment's there, their jerseys are hung up and ready to go. And then the other 2 buses go straight to the hotel. And I mean, then if it's a practice day, usually that might, if we've traveled the night before, the practice might be at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, they'll have like a bus at 11. They have a meal at the hotel first, a breakfast set up for them. They usually have like a 2-hour window where they can go eat, but you wouldn't believe the food setup they have there with the options they like. If any player had anything they wanted, it's available. And then the bus will take them to practice, they have meetings, watch film, and then the bus takes them back. Then they're kind of on their own for the rest of the day. But the same is true on a game day. I mean, it is planned down to the minute they have breakfast, they have skate, they have a after skate meal, they have a snack before the bus leaves to go back to the rink. It's the efficiency with which they move on a daily basis is impressive. So when they get an off day, like for example, on this trip, when we had the 2 off days in a row, that's where they get a night where they can let her rip if they want, go have some fun. They had that in Montreal because the next day they weren't going to practice. All we had to do was get on a train to go to Ottawa. And in Boston, when we arrived, to have that Sunday, the full day off where they didn't have to skate, didn't have to practice, could go have dinner and do whatever they wanted. Those days are few and far between on the road.
Yeah. I went to before the Chicago game. I don't even know if I told you, I flew to Atlanta just for that day to go to Trampled by Turtles show. And when I was backstage afterwards, I took a picture of their show day schedule because it reminded me of what it's like to be, for you guys. And it's same thing from 5 a.m. to 1 a.m., everything to the minute, from sound checks to security meetings. Like, you never think about this, but after that concert in Paris, with that horrible, terrorist attack, like they have evacuation meetings on what to do if something happens while they're on the stage, their loadouts, everything. It was pretty fascinating. But it's a whole same thing, like this whole list of time by time by time of all the.
It is amazing how it is like clockwork, and there's so many uncertainties you'd think with bus times and all, but it is. I'll look at my watch and 11:04. Here we go down the tarmac, and away we go.
And if you're a minute late, they leave you.
Oh, they will leave.
Yeah. Even it doesn't matter. We're not telling you just Anthony. No. I mean, if you are a player and you are not gone,
right? And now when we're leaving after a game, that's a little less of a factor because we're all on the buses going. But I mean, the game ends, and I'll get a text within 2 minutes of what time the bus is leaving to go to the airport. And if it says 10:20. At 10:19, the door's closing, the ramp's going up, and the bus is starting to pull away.
One of the great stories back in the early 2000s, Terry Murray is the coach of the Florida Panthers. Brian Murray is the GM, his brother. And he was late for a team bus, and boom, Terry's like, go. Brian got left at the hotel, had to kick a cab out to Canada. Not an easy cab. You should have seen him when he walked into that freaking arena. He was steaming. It was unbelievable. And Terry Murray leaving his brother, who was his boss at the team hotel, he missed the bus.
It is not quite the same in all sports. And we've had a couple entertaining for us, where we've been leaving at the same time as the Timberwolves. And let's just say that if their charter, quote, leaves at 2, their players maybe get there at 2. They may not.
It's like you coming to a podcast.
We've had 3 or 4 different times where we've been leaving at the same time, and I've texted my buddies on the Wolves plane as we're driving down the tarmac saying, "Hey, just what time does your 2:00 flight leave today?" Just out of curiosity, and I'll get a text from them like 2:48. Here we go. We're leaving because everybody's here, and I'm just saying, like, if a Wild player showed up at 1:52, they'd be left behind because. It's pretty lax. Like we don't go through security or anything. They randomly check a few guys, but they've said if we're leaving at 2, be on the plane in your seat at 1:45, which seems fair enough. But if you're not, they'll leave without you.
We have a quick question. This is your last call. If you want to come up and ask a question, we're going to wrap up the show. Remember, Jackson Drum is check out It's givesendgo.com/pray-for-Jackson to check out and read about what he's going through right now. Question, sir?
Something my 9-year-old son has picked up on your home broadcasts is the gentleman that holds the door for the player interviews. He always messes with his mustache. He wants to know why they do that.
Probably. I haven't asked him about it, but the previous guy used to give a signal home.
Yeah.
We used to tug on his ear, I think.
Yeah,
if I remember
Wes,
right,
when
but-
his mom, when she was going through, she has since passed, but it was like a little signal to his mom. I haven't seen the mustache.
I haven't either, but I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's a little signal home.
I'll ask him tomorrow at the morning skate because he works the morning skates too. I'll ask him. Any other questions, or we're going to wrap up the show? Nothing? Going once, going twice. We don't know our next live show yet, but I believe it's going to be March 12th. So pay attention to on our social media or our next couple podcasts to determine when and where that will definitely be. It'll either be here at Split Rocks, at Elsie's, or at Tuttle's. We have 2 more pods the rest of the month. I'll be in either Montreal or Boston. Anthony will be in Costa Rica. You sure about this? I don't mind getting
absolutely.
a guest.
Oh, yeah. We're for sure.
All right. Cool.
We might have live guests from Costa Rica, too.
Is Vinny going to be there?
No, AJ is there.
Okay, great. And then we'll have one last show after the Four Nations, before the Colorado-Utah trip. We'll figure out something. And then soon enough, man, the trade deadline's right around the corner. Unless there's a season-ending injury, it's going to be very, very hard for the Wild to do much at all. Thanks to everybody for coming out here to Split Rocks in the Aquarius Home Services studio. Thanks to our incredible sponsors, Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems, Royal Credit Union, Twill and the Edina Galleria, OnX Fish, Clamshell Beach Resorts, and Giggly THC Beverages. And make sure you get your 50% off coupon right here at the front for Giggly THC Beverages. Talk to you next week, everybody. See ya.
Thank you.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world